Okay, so I'm going to stitch the face on this mouse, and I'm going to do it entirely by machine. What I'm going to do, I'm pulling it out from under the foot first to tell you what I'm going to do, because it can be really hard for you to see. Even with a clear foot, it can be hard for you to see what's actually happening under the needle. So we're going to start with the eyes, and I'm going to set the needle in right behind that dot for the eye. And I've got it set on a pretty short stitch length. So my machine defaults to 2.5, and I'm going to set it at a 2.0 for this. So what I'm going to do is just do one stitch forward, one stitch back, one stitch forward, one stitch back. I'm basically going to do 5 stitches over there. But I do want to give you a heads up that my machine ties a knot at the beginning and the end of its stitching. So what you're going to see the needle doing is it's going to go up and down, and it takes 3 really tiny stitches in place to start. Those aren't actual stitches, that's just the needle tying a knot. So it's going to go 3 stitches, and then it'll do its first stitch forward. So let's do that. Now we'll try and stay out of the way of the needle so you can see. All right, so I just sank my needle right on the back side of that little dot for the eye. And now I'm going to start stitching. So remember, it's going to do 3 stitches to tie the knot and then a stitch forward. Okay, now I'm spinning it so I can do a stitch backwards. You can also press the back, but it's easier to spin. Now I'm going to do, this is stitch 3, and this is stitch 4. And now on the 5th stitch, I'm actually going to push the button that ties a knot, because it's going to do a tiny stitch forward and then go in a couple of times to tie it off. And now you can see, let me snip that thread off. And you can see I've got a tiny little eye stitched. So I'm going to do the same thing now on the other eye. Okay, I just sank it in behind the eye, and now I'm going to do its knot and a stitch forward. That's a forward, back, 2, 3, 4, and now I'm going to go forward and tie the knot. All right, let me get that snipped off. And now you can see I've got 2 little eyes stitched up. Now we're going to do the nose, and what I do for the nose is I'm going to stitch a little triangle actually around that dot. And I'm going to start at the bottom of the nose, and I'm going to go around it 3 times. And then, without tying a knot or anything, I'm going to go down and stitch the mouth, and then we'll come back and tie a knot right in the middle of that nose. Okay, so let's stitch up this nose. I'm going to sink the needle, just like before, just on the top side of that dot for the nose. And now I'm going to stitch at a little angle, because that's the bottom point of the triangle. So I'm going to stitch here, over, and back down to the triangle. And remember, it's going to tie that knot first. That was the knot. That's my first side of the triangle. Now I'm going to go across the top, and now I'm going to go back down to that point, and now I'm going to go a second time around. And one more time around. This is where I really like that needle down, presser foot up feature on my machine. All right, now there's a little hole still in the middle of the nose, but we're not going to worry about that yet. Now I'm going to do 2 stitches down from the bottom of his nose. And now I'm going to make him smile, so I'm going to make a stitch that angles up a little bit. And now I'm going to go over that stitch a second time by just going back down. And now I'm going to do the smile on the other side. Just get that thread out of the way so I don't accidentally stitch on it. Up and then back down. And now I'm back at the bottom of that downstroke below his nose, and I'm going to take 2 stitches back up to his nose. And now I'm going to go one more stitch, and that's going to get me right in the middle of his nose, and now I'm going to tie that knot. And now, I won't bother cutting the thread, but you can see we've got a little triangle nose and a smiling mouth. Next up, I'm going to show you how to do the whiskers. And I only do I did 3 rows of stitching all around the body, but I'm only going to do 2 rows of the whiskers. It just makes them a little bit finer, and it's easier. So, we're going to start, you always want to start, let me go back here. You always want to start at the printed side of the whisker, because of course I was only able to transfer the whiskers onto the body pattern. So I'm going to start stitching there to establish my line, and then I'm going to continue a little bit onto the ear because your whiskers are going to go past the sides of the face. And then I'm going to turn around and go back and tie a knot. And I'm actually going to count how many stitches because that makes it easy to make all of my whiskers the same length. So we're going to start in here, just on the top whisker. And again, it's going to do a couple of stitches in place to tie the knot, and then we're going to go, usually I end up going 7 or 8 stitches forward. All right, that's my knot tied, and now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I'm going to turn it around and come right back on that same line. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I'm right back where I started, and I'm going to tie that knot. And I'm just going to do the same thing over and over again for all of these whiskers. I'll repeat it one time just to get you the second one, but I'm not going to show you 6 whiskers. So I sink it right at the start of that whisker. It's going to knot. 1, 2, 3, and now it's going to do one. That was 1 stitch forward. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I'm going to spin it around and come right back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to tie a knot. And that is how you stitch the entire face by machine. And there he is with all of his whiskers stitched. And remember, when I crop the block, I am going to crop it so it cuts off the bottom of his body so that that will disappear into the seam, and it's going to look like he is peeking into this block.